It is that iconic image of the mushroom cloud that still reminds many people of the Cold War's nuclear arms race and the pervasive fear of nuclear annihilation. More than 60 years ago, the camera captured the testing of one of the first nuclear weapons over the southwestern desert of the United States. 2 American bombs had vaporized Hiroshima and Nagasaki to bring the Second World War to a close. Later, Americans and Soviets learned to fear each other. Children were taught to crouch under their desks and practice air raid drills, as if that would protect them from the unseen effects of radiation. Even as nuclear energy was being brandished as a weapon of mass destruction, it was also being promoted as a peaceful tool, as a clean and virtually unlimited source of electric power generation. But then, 2 nuclear power disasters, in 1979 at the 3 Mile Island plant in the United States and in 1986 at the Soviet reactor in Chernobyl, reignited public fears of radiation exposure. Russian scientist and environmentalist Alexei Yablokov is an expert on radiation and nuclear safety. He says Chernobyl spewed 1,000 times more radioactive particles into the atmosphere than 3 Mile Island, and the Soviet government wasted valuable time by covering up the disaster for 36 hours after the first explosion. Thousands of lives were lost, he says, and the human toll is still apparent 25 years later.
Several generations will be impact of Chernobyl. Genetical damage, health damage, and so on. It's huge. It's impossible to forget Chernobyl.
And now, Japan's nuclear disaster at the Fukushima reactor complex has once again raised radiation anxiety around the globe. Are these fears realistic? Gerald Epstein of the American Association for the Advancement of Science says it may surprise many people to know we are immersed in a sea of low-level radiation.
All life on the planet has evolved with that around. Human life has been living with that sort of radiation all around. Whatever effects that has, they've always been there. And the question is, are we at any increased risk from what might be released from the reactor? In almost every situation, whatever the increased risk is, it's very, very small.
Every time passengers go through security and board the airplane, they are exposed to radiation. As the plane goes higher in altitude, those same passengers get another minuscule dose from cosmic rays in the atmosphere. Epstein says there is natural radiation in the stones we use to build our buildings and homes, and in the soil that surrounds them. There is radiation from medical technologies such as X-rays and CT scans, and even from the potassium found in some fruit and vegetables.
Some fraction of all the potassium we eat is actually a radioactive form, and that radiation from this form of potassium forms some of the background exposure we're exposed to all the time.
Shortly after the nuclear disaster in Japan, many pharmacies in the U.S. reported receiving calls from Americans requesting potassium iodide capsules, which they believed would protect them from the radioactive iodine present in nuclear power plant emissions. Again, Gerald Epstein.
I don't think in either case there's any harm, but the harm they're avoiding may not be as much as the quote harm that actual pill would take.
Epstein predicts that many countries will be taking a hard look at their plans to build nuclear reactors in the immediate future. If those nations turn away from nuclear energy, he says, other sources of electricity must be found, sources with potential public health risks of their own. And it will once again be up to the public to decide what level of risk it can tolerate. Melinda Smith, VOA News.